Hi, everybody. Welcome to another awesome webinar on the series Becoming the Ultimate Office Manager. This is presented by eAssist Dental Solutions, and man, are we excited to be coming back to our second part 2 of 3 for this webinar. We are going to drop in the link for you guys in just a second here, part 1, just in case you missed it and you want to recap it. But I'm super excited for this webinar today. We're really excited to be bringing you 2 really talented new team members to eAssist, the wonderful Penny Reed, who you've known long before eAssist, her presence on eAssist, and we're super excited and honored to have her as part of our team, and of course, Dr. Roy Shelburne, another talented, brilliant mind, and we're excited to have him both part of the eAssist team and part of the webinar today. And today we'll be covering how to implement winning systems to maximize your practice collections. You want to go to the next slide for me, Penny?
Awesome. Yes, hang on one second here.
Awesome. While Penny's working through that one, a couple quick housekeeping rules just to keep you guys, I know you're going to ask, because everyone always does. Yes, we're going to send you guys the recording. You'll get that recording as soon as this is done. Usually within about a day or 2, we have that out to your email inbox. So if you are registered for today, you will receive that recording of this webinar. You are also going to get the slides that go with this webinar. So any questions you may have there, feel free to take some notes, but we will make sure you have these slides so that you can go back and reference this material in the future. Here's a few things we're planning to cover today. Again, we're going to go over what office managers need from the doctor and clinical teams and the best ways to ask for that information. That communication is so important for the systems. And then, of course, what the doctor needs and expects from the office manager. Also really important to have that communication established. We've got an idea for how to help you do that as well. And then we have the 7 musts for your office financial policy and process, and how to uncover mysteries behind the insurance billing, coding, documentation, and how to improve team communication in that area. Before we get started, a couple of things though to know about eAssist.
Here we go.
One more slide for me, Penny.
Okay.
All right, here's a lineup of some of the awesome things that eAssist does. We are a super...
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is and it's totally on me. Hang on here.
Hit just the back arrow on
there
your
you go. I got it. I know which button not to push anymore. So there we go, everybody.
Yeah, if you don't mind going back one more slide for us.
Okay. There we go.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for bearing with us on those technical errors. But we got here aligned with some of the services we offer. And the way I like to talk about what eAssist does is we really are an outside team, an outsourced team that remotely helps support the roles of the office manager and insurance coordinator, your front desk in general. So we not only have dental insurance billing and aging, but we also do billing to medical insurance for dental procedures, everything you need to get your credentialing up to snuff. And then we also have insurance verification, accounting, bookkeeping, and then all of your patient portion or patient billing statements, which we'll go into that a little further on today's webinar as well. Really aligns well with what we're talking about here. eAssist as a whole is actually the nation's #1 leading in dental billing service. We have over 1,200 team members, which is crazy because, we started just as one doctor and one office manager with an idea of something they could do better in the dental industry. So now to have a team of over 1,200 is incredible. We have thousands of dental practices who we work with. And you can see we've got a whole host of awards, which I'll humble brag on some other time for you guys. Let's keep moving. Awesome. These are our 2 very talented speakers that are with us today. Penny Reed is our Chief Strategy Officer at eAssist with 27 years of dental experience. And then Dr. Roy Shelburne, he's our Director of Insurance Administration and Compliance. Not only does he have 41 years of dental experience, but he also spent a year, almost 2, incarcerated. And he's going to talk to us about what that means, how that happened, how to prevent it happening in your practice and with your team. Our core purpose here at eAssist is really to deliver peace of mind. So we always like to start with this at the beginning of our webinar so that you understand our why. We're really here to make sure that your practice, your team, your processes deliver the ultimate peace of mind, whether that means that we're helping you, we're helping your office, your practice, your collections processing, your patients. We're here to make sure that you have peace of mind. And this webinar is just one of the ways we hope to do that. So we are all in the business of giving you as much information as possible, hopefully helping give you peace of mind in your processes. And we know that by giving that information to you, that we'll be able to help not only you, but the whole dental industry be better. And this is the fun slide our attorney makes us put in here. So all the fun little legal things that he likes to put in here to make sure we're covered. But this is really just us making sure you know that We're not giving you any kind of tax, legal, or investment advice. We are, however, a team of nearly 1,200 office managers and a couple of really awesome people like Dr. Shelburne who are here to help give you advice as far as what we've seen work in practices. That does not mean that we are covering every detail, all the requirements, and we are by no means a governing body on this or any other topic. So please don't sue us. That's really what that slide says. Please don't sue us. All right, Penny, I'm gonna let you take it over from here.
Okay, all right. What do office managers need from the doctor and clinical teams? Brought to you by a former office manager and a dentist. So I'm excited to participate in this. And Roy, I know you were going to kick us off here with a question about communication. So I'll have you go ahead and read the poll, and then we'll get going here with the poll right off the bat.
One of the things that will set most practices apart, the level of expertise they have, the excellence that they show, all based on communication. So we'd like for you to give us some feedback. Our office managers, how would you rate the level of communication between you and your doctor at this point? We'd love to be able to see what that is, and we'll share that with the group just to let you know where you might fit in that scale. Ultimately, things begin and end with clear communication. The office manager needs to be able to speak with the doctor honestly and openly, and the doctor to the office manager to communicate the expectations and to make sure those expectations are being met. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about communication. We're going to give you maybe 30 more seconds to do that. Penny, if you want to go ahead and forward the slide, we'll go ahead and get rolling, excuse me.
Yeah, I think while the poll's up, it won't forward. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's I think but I think I'd like to re-emphasize as well. I think whether it's coding or patient communication, handoffs, it all starts and ends with that communication. So yeah, it looks like we'll stay on this slide until that finalizes.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, would you guys
Go
like
ahead.
me to go ahead and end the poll and share the results?
Yes, please.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple other polls in here, and we'll be sharing those with us or with you. 14% above and beyond, we are best friends. 14%, can't complain, it's pretty excellent. 31%, meet my expectations and is acceptable. 32%, meh, one way or the other, not so much. Unacceptable, non-existent, that's only 2%. That's impressive.
It's impressive that it's only 2%. Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great feedback.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you for participating. We appreciate that. So what the office managers need from doctor and clinical team. We talked about communication. Part of the communication piece is leadership. Doctors, you need to, if there are any doctors listening, or if you are an office manager, encourage your doctor to develop the vision and the mission of that practice so everybody's on the same page. Would you agree, Penny?
Oh, absolutely.
And communicating those expectations, the vision and the mission statement to that office manager, important from the doctor, and then the office manager needs to clarify to make sure that they understand where the doctor is envisioning that practice to go. And in some practices, office managers can be part of that decision. There's a partnership there between the office manager and the doctor. We as dentists need feedback from our teams. We may be off course, so we need to have that honest negotiation and communication between one another. And honest feedback, be open to criticism. Both the office manager and the doctor need to be willing to stand back, first seek to understand where the other person is coming from and what they're trying to get across, and to do it in a way that honors one another's position, giving them the credit for the experience they've had and the opportunities they have to learn and to grow and to give back to that practice. And lastly, critical thinking. We need an office manager that is able to think on their feet, because if you've been in the dental office for any length of time, you have probably noticed the schedule doesn't always go the way it's expected. Patients don't always react the way that we think they're going to. So it's always a moving target. So that office manager needs to be able to think on their feet, to be able to move and pivot as necessary during that day, to be a little bit on the fluid side, to be able to take what happens in stride, understand what the ultimate goal is for that day. But if something happens where we are experiencing something that we're not expecting, how to deal with that, how to move, how to go, and to ultimately improve the patient experience. So clinical documentation, that's one of my passions. They shared in the beginning, and it's not a joke. I spent 19 months in federal prison for healthcare fraud, and one of the things I became aware of, that my clinical documentation was not what it was supposed to be. There were instances where there was in question what I did and why I did it, that if I had been more attuned to making that documentation in my clinical record, it would have actually been able to testify for me. So office managers, you're responsible for making sure the business part of the practice moves the way it's supposed to. And as far as billing, coding to the insurance companies, it's all based on that clinical record. And I know as an office manager from a doctor, you need that doctor to provide clear, concise documentation that includes a diagnosis. There should be a diagnosis listed there before any treatment is being initiated. So office managers, you're very well aware of what the insurance plans generally need in terms of documentation. So as far as the communication part, you need to alert that doctor, the clinical team, the people who are responsible for documenting that clinical record, what you need to be in that clinical record to not only document appropriately, but also to substantiate the treatment you're providing to that insurance carrier. And especially in today's world where we want to process patients, get them in, get them done and out, because we can't have waiting rooms packed with individuals anymore because of COVID. So you want to be able to process those individuals as quickly as possible and accurately as possible. Doctors need to provide you an accurate list of services, either posted or ready to post, so that when that happens, the insurance information can be transferred very easily to the insurance carrier for reimbursement. You can calculate patient portion and collect that. So that information needs to be completed before the patient is dismissed from the clinical area, and communicate your best, what you expect, back to the clinical staff so that they understand what the expectations are. It's easy to get a little frustrated and, pinned up. It's kind of like, I wish they'd give me this, I wish they'd give me that. Communicate. If we as our office want to provide excellent care for our patients, and by doing that also most efficiently process their insurance information, you need to provide the business people in your office information that they need to be able to process that as effectively as possible. Let's go ahead and move on.
Yeah, no truer words have been said, right? And I think from patient perception too, and we've all heard this said before, right? That the patients don't necessarily know great dentistry, but they know when they see a team communicating well, or if on the back end we don't have what we need as far as the documentation goes. So great points, Roy.
Correct. Now, there again, for the patient perspective, waiting at the front desk for the clinical documentation to be completed so they can check that patient out in some offices, it's very frustrating for both that team member who's sitting there with the person in front of them waiting for them to get it processed, and that team member hopefully getting that information timely so they can do that without the delay. So yeah, patient perception is going to be benefited by proper documentation and doing it before the patient's dismissed.
And I believe when we talked before, we talked that I would take this one, having been an office manager, and what we need from the doctor and the clinical teams: open communication that includes honest feedback. And it's all about the patient. When we think about vision statements in offices, I know one of my clients, he said, we just pretty much sum all of ours up to say it's all about the patient. So we have to be able to have open communication that we don't feel like we're stepping on each other's toes. But it needs to be accurate and complete regarding the treatment that's needed before the patient arrives at the front, like you mentioned. If we're going to get compensated the way that we need to, if we're going to, as office managers or financial coordinators, treatment coordinators, get the case acceptance that we want to get, we've got to have that information, and then also empower the administrative team to have those financial discussions and make those arrangements without the doctor overriding the internal financial protocol, right? You know, without the, we're having that discussion, and then the patient says, oh, Dr. Shelburne told me I didn't have to pay all that today, right? To which all of us are looking for Dr. Shelburne at the end of the day, if that is indeed what he said. So anything you want to add to that?
I would just add, we actually had the financial policy, and the team members knew that if I ever started to discuss finances, I got a kick in the shin, and it shut me up, and I had to let them, because if it were left up to me, I would give it away. So doctors, you need to know when to defer that. And if you've made that financial expectation from the team, do not overstep where you have adopted that. You need to agree to it and adhere to it.
Great point.
So what the doctor needs and expects from the office manager, co-ownership. You know, we need to have someone in that position who takes responsibility and understands that the success or failure of that practice is on them. And by the way, those patients who walk out, your paycheck is in their pocketbook, and the insurance companies that you're sending those claims to have a responsibility, because contractually they're obligated to pay that. So there again, that's co-ownership. Problem solver, there again, if we have instances that pop up in the office unexpectedly, we need you to be able to solve that and not involve the doctor unless it's absolutely necessary. Team player, you're often the quarterback who in the business area hands off the ball and makes sure that the plays run as they're supposed to. Communication expert, you set the trend as well in the practice as being an office manager, how we communicate, how we interact with each other, and those expectations.
Absolutely. And then I think, you know, what the doctor needs and should expect from the office manager, and we can banter back and forth on this one, Roy, but accurate numbers and consistency with the financial protocol. My husband is in management as well, and every now and then he'll mention things. He's newer to management. He's been in sales, and I say, you know what? The reason, if it was easy for companies to be consistent, you wouldn't have managers, right? So being sure, relying on the office manager to share those, keep an eye on and share those key performance indicators, being sure that they're up to date, responding to patient account inquiries within 24 hours, you know, when possible, being sure that there's documentation in the ledger about all of the contacts. And hey, Roy, you're the documentation expert, so I'd love for you to reiterate how important that is, that is documented when we're having those conversations.
Yeah, if it's not in your record, it didn't happen. You didn't say it. It didn't need to be said. It didn't happen at all from a legal standpoint. So anytime there's something that needs to be captured and documented so that it can be referred to in the future, either a financial agreement with a patient, it would be a treatment acceptance from a patient, it would be a clearance from the custodial parent to treat the child. If it's not there, and it comes to he said, she said, it's very hard to expect that people will believe you over the patient. It typically doesn't happen. So there's so much that you need to capture just to make sure that those touch points are documented appropriately.
Right. And I'll go into much more detail. Written financial agreements and/or third-party financing. That's what they're counting on us for, right? Is that they get the treatment accepted. We're doing the work, that we're getting paid, and then ensuring that the practice is PCI compliant. So your payment security standards, which are what allow you to accept the merchant processing, and also HIPAA compliant. So, you know, as technology advances and we have all these new cool things, we also have more that we have to be sure that we're in compliance with for us to be able to continue to do the work that we do.
So ultimately, by tracking these things, it gives us a reason to celebrate. You know, it's not to punish anybody. Those numbers should help us understand where we are, how we're improving, and how we continue to move forward so that we can stand back and go, we had an amazing day, we had an amazing week, we had an amazing month, whatever that is. We don't spend enough time celebrating those wins that we have, and being able to track that, understand what the expectations are, you can work toward that and to exceed it in a way that it makes it a great time to be able to celebrate.
Absolutely. And be sure celebrate the little things. If COVID taught us nothing else, it's that a regular work day was pretty phenomenal before all of that came along. So, all right. Well, Roy, share with us these billing mysteries and expediting the claim.
This is confusing and helpful if you do understand. Non-covered benefit legislation, there have actually been 40 states that have adopted non-covered benefit legislation. And to decipher that, the states have adopted laws that say if the insurance company does not pay for a service, then they can't tell you how much you can charge the patient for that service. The kicker on these is the definition of non-covered. Most people have a hard time understanding that. Non-covered in most states, all but one, Idaho, means that would it ever be covered, but although we don't pay for it, that's a covered expense. So in the event that a patient has an annual maximum of $1,500, they've hit the $1,500 and they have a crown that needs to be done. They send the claim for the crown. Since $1,500 has been paid out, there's no payment for the crown. And to most people, they would think, well, they didn't cover that, so we can bill the patient for whatever we want to. Actually, that is a covered benefit that would have been paid had the annual maximum been met. So unfortunately, even though they paid for nothing, they can still dictate to you how much you can charge the patient for it. And the optional service piece is with PPOs, there are many times when the PPO will remap that service from what you billed it to and what you provided the patient to something lower. Most policies include what's called an optional service clause, where if you agree with the patient is willing to pay for the upgraded service, you have that documentation, you send that along with a claim to the insurance company. Insurance companies recognize that as an agreement between you and the patient. They'll pay for the optional upgraded service, and you can charge the patient the difference between, so you're not limited to the PPO fee in instances where that can be evoked. So a little mystery that probably takes a little bit more deeper explanation, but I think it will give you an idea that there are ways to work with a system to maximize your legitimate reimbursement. You know, we're talking about also a few mysteries in dental billing. For example, magic words. If you've noticed when you send the claim off to the company and you may call for follow-up, that the person who answers that phone does not have the best English. They actually usually farm that overseas, and they're given a list of magic words so that if it's on the claim form, they approve the claim. So as far as core buildups, the word is retention. Without the core buildup, the tooth wouldn't be able to retain the crown. Attrition, abrasion, erosion. None of those are covered by most plans. It's considered a parafunctional habit and they exclude it. However, if the tooth is fractured, broken, whatever that might be, focus your narrative on the fracture, because they will disallow any treatment because of attrition, abrasion, erosion. Scaling and root planing, the three things that need to be there is pocketing 4 to 5 millimeters or greater, depending on the plan limits. There needs to be bleeding on probing, and there needs to be bone loss of 10% or greater. Arrestin, key to Arrestin is that it will not be reimbursed by most plans if it's done on the same day as scaling and root planing. Their sequencing would be you scale, root plane, bring the patient back in 4 to 6 weeks, and any residual pockets, then you treat with Arrestin. If it's done on the day that the scaling and root planing is done, probably not covered. Gingivectomies, again, need to be before the restorative procedure. If it's on the same day of the restorative procedure, not included. As far as the expectation is, you do the gingivectomy, you give it time to heal, so you know where that margin is going to be once it heals, and then you do the restorative procedure. Radiographic images, number one, they need to be medically necessary, not because the insurance is going to pay for them. Number two, they meet the clinical standard. When you review that, if it's a bad x-ray, if you bill the insurance for that, that is a worthless service you billed for. And thirdly, the documentation needs to establish the fact that the doctor reviewed and read them. Periodontal maintenance, as far as that goes, it has to follow scaling and root planing. Some insurance companies will have a limit of 2 years. Anything after 2 years following the scaling and root planing, it may not be covered anymore. There may draw the line there. And some insurance companies, although I would never recommend that you alternate the 4910 with the pro fee, some insurance companies, if you do start to use the pro fee, that's going to cut off the 4910 so that no 4910s will be covered after the pro fee is submitted. So the just little nuances you might be aware of to be able to address those and not miscalculate what the insurance is going to pay for or not provide them the documentation they need.
I have to say that has to be the most comprehensive list of billing mysteries expedited that I've ever heard covered in that short of a period of time. And if you want to learn more about that, we'll share with you later on in the presentation. We actually have an entire coding webinar series coming up. So if you're like me, I'm like, wow, we could probably listen to Roy all day on that, and we could. So any other billing mysteries that you want to share, Roy, regarding optional services that we may not have covered a few minutes ago?
There are lots of things, but in taking into consideration the time we have, I don't think we could do that justice. Okay. So rather than do it halfway, let's go ahead and move forward. Okay.
All right. How about the accurate insurance verification and plan limitations and restrictions? We actually spent, if you did not tune in to the first of this series, I believe if you would put in the chat, we can let you know how, well, number one, if you were on there, you got an email with a link to the recording, but that recording would be made available to you. It was chock full of information on being sure that you've got what you need to verify, and also finding out about plan limitations and restrictions, which you would think that all of this would get easier as insurance, the world of insurance reimbursement advances, yet it seems to get more and more complicated. So I know, Sarah, I believe you were going to share with our audience some of the distinctions regarding some of the greatest needs between the doctor and office manager.
Sure. Yeah, the greatest needs between the doctor and office manager. These are really based off of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And you can see if you have not read that, I would highly recommend it. This is a quick parable, really more than a book, and you guys can probably knock it out in your reading very, very quickly. But you can see here it's actually based off of 5 dysfunctions and how to overcome them as a team. And the way you can overcome dysfunctions within your team between the doctor and the office manager, or the office manager and the clinical team, is really between some of these items we've got bulleted here. This is the highest level summary of this. It is so worth reading the full parable by Patrick Lencioni. But you can see here that, of course, it's about building trust, communication, a freedom to debate, disagree, and compromise. We call that mining for conflict, healthy conflict that you can have as a team, disagreeing about ideas without taking it personally, and then commitment to excellent patient care, to the patient and to the team, accountability, and of course, results.
Awesome. Thank you. So when you think about whether it's related within the team, like between the doctor and the office manager, team member to team member, and then, okay, how does that convey to what we're talking about today? Well, 80% of the work that we do, and this is not only the administrative function, reimbursement is a team sport, coding is a team sport. At 80% of the work that we need to do, that it takes to collect on what we produce, really must be done on the front end. When we get to the back end, right, like after the claim has been filed, after it's been paid, delayed, or denied, that's when it's really hard. So if we're going to do this and do it well, then we've got to focus a lot on the front end, which is what we'll be covering now. And then also balancing, we've got the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Some of the biggest dysfunctions that we have between a dental practice and the patient, they're related to balancing relationships and expectations. So, we have to be careful when we are setting the expectation for patients and communicating that we're preserving that relationship. It's the offices where it's like, well, boom, this is our office policy, and this is just how we do things. And, if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. That would be way heavier on the expectation side than it would be on relationships. If we're heavier on the relationship side, it's the, oh, you don't want to pay today, that's okay, right? So we're continuously doing that, and needing to be mindful. Communication plays such a role in not only what we say, but also how we say it. We really want to focus on financial policy and process and the 7 musts and where that begins. First, we've got to remember, we can get so, and I'm just going to say, beaten down and rejected. One of my roles before I became the office manager, I was that financial coordinator, right? And it can be easy when people don't schedule to feel rejected, right? Or when they say that phrase, I only want to do what my insurance will pay, which could be another series. Unless we know why that patient is there, they came there to be cared for. What are their goals? What's most important to them? And so when we're having that handoff of communication, like what Dr. Shelburne mentioned earlier, we've got to be sure that part of that handoff has to do with that patient's why. Super important. And then the other is we've got to know internally what's our financial policy, meaning what options are we even offering to the patient in regards to how we're going to handle not only the outstanding balances, but the outstanding credits. And I learn new things every day. Dr. Shelburne shared something with me that I was not aware of regarding patient credit balances on their accounts. Would you enlighten us a little bit on that?
I'll be happy to. There's a limit set in states regarding the amount of time an entity can maintain a negative balance for a patient. Most is a year, some will be 2 years. After that period, you need to contact the patient about the credit balance and ask them what they'd like done with it. If you can't get in touch with the patient to let them give you guidance on what to do with it, you're obligated by the state to return that money to the state unclaimed property division so that they keep that for the patient on your behalf. So there are legal responsibilities for those negative balances to transfer them and deal with them appropriately. You just can't let them sit on your account for years and years.
Forever. Yeah. And if your doctor's thinking about a practice transition, it's not great to keep those credit balances on there anyway. It just muddies the waters. If you have a lot of them and you're curious what to do, refund checks are great marketing tools. You can easily put a couple of referral cards in there. It's also a great reason to call up a patient and say, hey, how's that area doing on the upper left? We noticed that you have a credit balance of $100 and we'd be happy to send that to you, or you can apply that to treatment. We'd love to get you scheduled. So, but back to the ranch, I digress. Financial policies and processes. So every office should have an internal financial policy. You should have an external one too. But your practice financial policy pertains to the payment options you're going to offer to your patients. And then also we want to make the patient aware of the expectations. When we don't have a policy and a process, that's when we get put on the spot, right? The patient bats their eyelashes at you, with the big eyes of, I don't know how I'm going to pay for that. And then we kind of deviate from what the plan is and we wind up making considerations and exceptions, and then we don't get paid for those. So that can be really difficult.
If you don't have a financial policy, the patient substitutes their policy for
absolutely
your policy.
Absolutely. Just like the patients that used to come around, right? If we don't have it, the ones that used to come around the desk and point out on the computer when they wanted to come in. That was always fun. So this is a financial policy for Dr. Ima Sample, and I believe our team has got these forms available from when we were talking in the prep. So we'll be sending out these forms if you guys would like copies of them. So this is Dr. Ima Sample. You get it, Ima Sample. So this can be an example of what the patient, and I want to make a big distinction, what we have the patient sign when they're learning what our financial policy offerings are. So we can do this with their initial paperwork. One of the biggest confusions that I find though, is that when I say, well, do you have a signed financial agreement? And dental teams will say, well, we have this. This is just letting them know what's available. This is not a financial agreement for a certain sequence of treatment. So I'll share with that with you in a moment. By the way, if one of your greatest frustrations because as a dental coach, this is a big frustration often with clients, especially when they're first bringing a coach on board. We actually do patient billing. Many of you, if you're familiar with eAssist, we're best known for our core product, which is the dental billing, the insurance filing, follow-up, fighting for you to get your reimbursement from the dental insurance companies. And then we also have a add-on service, a sister product. And Sarah, feel free to chime in if I'm leaving anything out, that we can actually do that for you. We can do the billing and follow up with your patients to help you better manage your accounts receivable.
Absolutely. And I know we're going through a lot of ways today and a ton of different systems and strategies to ensure that your collections are fully maximized. We know patient billing is a big one. And it's a big area where I think a lot of people are sometimes uncomfortable. How do I have this conversation with my patients? What do I say? How do I engage with them? How aggressive should I be in making sure that that bill gets paid? And the follow-up process and how you do it. And so one of the things that's really unique about our system with our patient billing service, it's not a robo text, right? That's just sending out a robo email of a statement. It's not automated like that. What it is it's a human. It's a real human being following up the way that you would follow up with a patient if you were doing it yourself, treating them the way that you would want your patients to be treated, communicating with them human to human, right? And so it's a really cool service offering we have. I don't really know of a lot of other people in the industry that actually do it this way. It's usually an auto text or a robo email or a little bit disconnected, a little lack of human touch there. We really have tried to bring the best of both of those worlds, some automation, some support, some customization, but really using the power of human touch here. So it's a really great service. I'd love to have anybody who might have questions about it or want to know more. You can email me directly at team@eassist.me. I'd love to answer whatever questions you guys have.
Awesome. So here's a poll for you. Does your office utilize written financial agreements on treatment amounts that are greater than $500? Or maybe it might be greater than 1,000, but if it's greater than 500, no matter the amount, do you ever utilize a written financial agreement where your patient signs how they're going to pay, right? If it's anything other than payment in full. So of course you do, or not every time, whenever I remember, what can I say? I'm busy. Or what is a financial agreement? And if you answer the last one, that's okay, because I'm going to share one with you. So we'll give you a moment or two. I'm very curious to see what our audience has going on in their practices. And by the way, thank you guys for making time in your day to spend with us. We know that you have many other things going on, and we really enjoy having you. And for those that tune in after the fact, we enjoy having you too. We don't want you to feel left out. So again, we'll give you another few seconds to pick your answer. Does your office utilize written financial agreements on treatment amounts greater than $500? All right, if we could close the poll. Survey says, of course, always. That just warms my soul. 55%. Excellent. Not every time. Okay, 35%. Whenever I remember, what can I say? 4%. What is a financial agreement? 6%. I bet most of you, the 6 of you that picked that, just have a great sense of humor. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So we want to understand that we're not a bank, and that there are significant regulatory requirements if you do decide that you want to be a bank and provide in-house financing. So when we're looking at, by me saying written financial agreement, I don't necessarily mean that you're having them sign how they're going to pay you in payments. Okay. I would never recommend that you are a bank. If you are going to offer some sort of in-house financing that you do, and you're going to do credit checks on your patients, whoever it is that you're getting permission, that you're signed up with to do those credit checks, be sure that you're following those guidelines and regulations in your state, because I can promise you there are some. Yep. So again, going back, let's be clear on our internal processes on how the financial agreements are made and what needs to be part of the financial agreement protocol. So years ago, when I first worked retail, when I was in college, I mean, this is like many years ago, I'm old, before the internet was invented for sure. When this was a Macy's type store, every now and then the system would go down and the link did not communicate to the satellite to say, okay, this person using their in-store card has a credit limit of XYZ. Well, if that happened, there was a floor limit of $200, right? So even if that link was down, we could get the credit card out and the little machine, that you do back and forth with the number, and we could do a $200 purchase, or we'd have to pick up the phone and call to get permission. So that's where I get the term floor limit, right? So if it's less than $500, or some clients may say less than $1,000, it depends on what your what your tolerance is for risk, that we get a written financial agreement. I've had some offices say, well, shouldn't we do it on everything? Well, you can, right? It just takes more time. So get commitments in writing for how the patient will handle their financial obligation prior to scheduling or prior to treatment being rendered if it's happening same day. And now if they're paying in full today or paying in full pre-treatment, we don't have to worry about this. But if everybody paid in full today or pre-treatment, well, we probably wouldn't be having this webinar. So go ahead, Roy.
Putting my compliance hat on here, more than likely there's a state requirement, depending on the amount, where they actually have to have all the documentation that they would if they were a lending institution. So be aware your state may have a threshold that if you are financing anything above an X amount, you're going to have a truthing lending agreement. You're going to have everything a bank would have if they loaned money on a car sale. So just be aware. That
just makes me tired hearing about it. It really does. So again, establishing when that signed financial agreement is necessary. And I have a cute little flow chart that our eAssist team, I think, made even cuter, because I can remember several years back, we had some clients that were just really kind of struggling with wrapping their brain around this. So it can kind of go in a big circle, but the patient is seated and treated, right? So then the patient's diagnosed, let's say, with that next phase of treatment. Patient says, yes, I want to do it. All right. If it's less than $500, they just sign the treatment plan acknowledging, hey, I understand what it is that we're doing. If it's greater than $500, they're signing a financial agreement form and the treatment plan, right? We're doing that. Then we can proceed with the treatment, getting it scheduled. Then the patient checks in, patient pays, including any previous balances that they may have. And then it can sort of flow in a circle. So if in your brain, if you're thinking, wow, I really want to share this information with the team, and when you get a copy of the slides, you'll have that. Whatever this threshold is that you determine for your office, like maybe it's not $500, maybe it's $1,000 or $2,000, you could fill that in. So consistency and accuracy are super important when conducting the patient billing in general. And here comes this written financial agreement, which you're going to say, this is really too small for us to see. Again, we are happy to send that to you. I'm going to have our team type in the chat. I just want to be sure that I'm not overstepping if we're sending that to everyone or if they need to ask for it, because those forms are available. But I'm going to break this down into some components. And hey, pop quiz. Where does this come from? This paragraph, this is what's up at the top of the form. We'd put the date, the patient name, the treatment plan total, and then the agreement total, which if it's a PPO, let's say the treatment plan total may be $2,000, but the contract fee may be $1,500. Let's showcase the fact, let's market the fact that we are doing that for them, right? A lot of the times they may not realize there's a difference, but this paragraph, I have been informed of the treatment plan and associated fees for all charges for dental services and materials not paid by my dental benefit plan unless prohibited by law, or the treating dentist or dental practice has a contractual agreement with my plan prohibiting all or a portion of such charges. To the extent permitted by law, I consent to your use and disclosure of my personal health information to carry out payment activities on conjunction with this claim. So this is not a poll. If you want to drop this in the chat, I know that probably puts you to sleep. And sometimes people will say, Penny, you wrote that. I did not write it. Dr. Shelburne didn't write it either.
I
So
see it a lot.
Yeah. So do we have, what kind of guesses do we have going on here?
They thought it was a
okay. You know what, for the sake of time, I'll just tell you that comes from the ADA claim form. And the reason that most of us don't even I didn't know that it was there is because years ago, when we quit using the little, which is the noise that the printer used to make if you've been in dentistry for a long time, or the little laser printer, when we got away from really doing paper claims and we began to just fill in, check that little box that says signature on file, right? I put my signature on file if I'm the patient and I'm telling the insurance company that they can pay the practice. If they were physically putting their signature on file on the ADA claim form, that's off the ADA claim form. Like, we're not making this stuff up, right? That insurance doesn't necessarily cover everything. So we have to remember, as much as we want to provide accurate information because we know it allows us to collect the right amount and have happy patients, it's the patient's insurance. So again, we're kind of balancing relationship and expectation. We want to be the expert. We want to reduce frustration on behalf of the patient. And at the same time, it's the patient's benefit plan. So let's not take away their ownership. So that's why I put that little paragraph at the top of the financial agreement form, because they should be aware of it. And then we have to be careful too. I'm not saying don't tell patients about their plan, but when we tell them all about it, we have to be sure that we're also, because if we just verbally do it, that we're letting them know they still own it, right? So the more information we give, then they're upset later. Well, Penny said this would be covered. So we want to make the patient also aware of the full fee and no surprises. Like, let's let them know what that full fee is. We're not saying that we're making them pay that full fee, but often they're upset later on because all we told them, I've seen it happen hundreds, if not thousands of times, is what their portion was when the insurance is involved. So next you would have your payment terms. Go ahead, Dr. Shelburne.
Word to use whenever you're communicating anything about the expectation from an insurance plan is estimate, estimate, estimate. Our estimate is, however, it's subject to. Never say your insurance is going to pay this, because you don't know what the insurance is going to pay. It's estimate, estimate, estimate.
And that's another reason why I'm such a fan, even though I'm not naive to know this takes it takes a little bit of extra time. I believe it's worth it. So you've got the terms of payment, which you would put in your terms, right? All the different things that you offer. If you offer third-party financing, like a care credit or something like that, your credit cards that you take, you may or may not want all of this information on the form, right? This is a teaching form. So it may be, I'm going to use my MasterCard, right? And they're like, okay, then we can store that securely in our software system. I do not recommend that you store those in a recipe box in your office, although I've seen that happen before too. If you are taking an appointment reservation fee, either to reserve it because that's part of your office policy, or perhaps it's a sedation patient or a really lengthy appointment, you could put that amount in here, and then the amount that they're going to pay at initial treatment. And then what Dr. Shelburne was referring to earlier, there's an insurance section, right, where this is where we're saying we direct that the dental benefits would be otherwise payable to me, would be payable to the practice. And then making a commitment that if the plan has not paid within a certain amount of time, this is how I plan to pay the office. I plan to put it on care credit. I plan to pay with my credit card. I plan to write a check. Even if you don't get that amount on file, because you are having them make this commitment, it reinforces, and I fully agree with you, Dr. Shelburne, about being sure that we're using the term estimate. Yet even when patients sign something like this, they can still have a little bit of amnesia, right? Sometimes you even have to pull this back out, right? To say, hey, this is what, what we reviewed, this is what we went over, because we're trying to balance that relationship with expectations. Who wants to lose a great patient because of confusion about what the benefit plan would do? So there's also a place for a signature for the patient or a guardian, and also the financial coordinator signature, right? And then we've got a copy of that. We can scan it. Eventually, we're going to get to the point. I know a lot of offices are quote unquote paperless, right? Meaning they have an electronic record. We're getting to the point to where anything that could be done on paper can be done electronically, which is fantastic. And I would say if you do not have anything like that, I would go with the paper, right? You can scan it and then shred it. The back side of this, which you could, or the second page of this, and you could absolutely use your treatment plan from the computer. If you want to, you can even circle what the tooth numbers are. Some of the things that patients I've seen get upset is we make a financial agreement and they think it's for their entire mouth and it was for a quadrant, right? So we not only want to be clear about the amounts, we need to be, they don't know tooth numbers, but they can sort of figure out when you circle a picture. So for some offices that I work with, they love this form. If you already have something that's working, 55% of you said that you did, I would say carry on. But if this is helpful to you, then we would love for you to use this as well. Any comments, Dr. Shelburne, regarding sequencing or anything that I've covered so far with the written financial agreement?
No, in terms of sequencing, do the most acute first. But other than that, it's up to you and the patient to determine where you'd like to start based on their chief complaint and the things that they're concerned with. But great information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then have simple pre-treatment and post-treatment payment options. So really, if we're doing our job, right, I'm saying our job as a team, getting the appropriate amount from the patient on the front end, we should have very little need for post-treatment payment options, right? Because everything would already be taken care of. Yet we need to be prepared. If we're handling our patient billing in-house and the patient has a balance, there needs to be an option. More than likely, they were not expecting to have a balance. So we want to be sure that we have options for them to be able to pay that. If you do not have a link on your website for patients to be able to go to and make a payment, or the ability to send them a text and allow them to make a payment, let's try to think like a patient and let's make it as simple as possible when patients do want to pay us. So we want to be sure pre-treatment, you definitely want third-party financing. If you feel like you need multiple options, well, then by all means have those. And just remember, if a patient isn't approved by any of those options, we don't need to be carrying a balance either. That would be a great time to consider pre-treatment payments. I wouldn't call it layaway, but think of a layaway, right? They can go ahead and make payments in advance toward that treatment, and then we render the treatment once they've made the payment in full. Okay, so again, just a little reminder here about our patient billing services. We definitely are doing our best to give you the tools to handle this in-house. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, we have an amazing team. And really the purpose of this being outsourced is it's not collections. Like we don't want you to wait until, oh, wow, it's been a year, we're probably not going to get paid. Benchmarks of aging by total receivables. And I can remember sitting in a seminar that was not just dental based, it was based, collections overall. And at the time, this was years ago, they said the dentist and the physician on the list of order of when things get paid, like number one would be, your house note, number two, maybe your utilities. The medical practice was like number 17 after the cable bill. The cable bill is probably higher than that now. So if you're curious about your total accounts receivable, so this isn't just insurance aging, this is all of the monies owed to the practice on behalf of the patient. So this would also include the amount that we're expecting from insurance. These are some healthy guidelines. So your what's current, which would be less than 30 days, should be around 66%. It could be great. This is the one that could be greater. That would be totally okay. 30 plus, so 30 to 60 should be about 10 to 13%. And so should 60 or 61 to 90. And the reason for that is if we can manage that as an office in those categories, then it keeps us from getting to that 90 plus, where now we've got things that are beyond 3 months old. These are national collection statistics, when a balance, not a ortho balance, right? Or something where we have ongoing treatment, but when a aged balance reaches 90 days or greater, there is a 33% or less chance that it will ever be collected, right? So we want to be sure, again, this is overall receivables, that is less than 8%. If it's not, then it may be time to do a little cleanup, right? Go in and look at if you've got some balances that have been out there for years and years. Some of those may not be collectible. But go in and look to see what truly is, and be sure we've got a few tips coming up here for you that you're managing that. But other KPIs before we get to that part, accounts receivable, and normally it's doctors that ask as far as the amount, and I'll get to that in a moment. But like, what should it be? What's a healthy amount? Well, first, let's talk about what is it. So your accounts receivable, the overall definition, it's money owed to the practice for services that have already been rendered, right? So again, it includes monies that you're expecting from the patient, monies that you're expecting from the insurance. Ultimately, the patient is responsible for their balance, right? We have to be careful how we communicate that, right? But ultimately, the patient is responsible for all of it. So if you're wondering, all right, so I'm an office manager, maybe I'm new, maybe I haven't been doing this for, 2 years or 10 years or 20 years, what should my accounts receivable be? Okay, so if you look at, your practice averages $100,000 a month in production, and I want to say collectible production. So this would be net production after adjustments. And you're, okay, well, what should our accounts receivable be? It should be no more than 1 or even 1.1, right? So you could type in 1.1 in your calculator. This makes the math easy. Your accounts receivable should be no more than $100,000. So if your average monthly net production is $150,000, your total accounts receivable should be no more than $150,000. There's a reason that you don't want it to zero, right? Unless you're one of those unique, and I know of some fee-for-service practices where patients pay you in full, insurance reimburses them, then you're right, you would have no accounts receivable. You don't want it any greater than that because it's just too big to manage, right? So whatever that number is, as your practice grows, if it's 200,000, your AR should be around 200,000. So overdue account checklist, just a few tips. Be sure that those statements are sent at least once a month. Electronic is preferable for a variety of reasons, gives you the ability for your patients to get those via email. Also, what I have found, if I've got my coaching hat on, when we're sending paper statements, we don't send them as often because they take longer to do, right? We feel like we've got to go through every single one of them. My theory is push the statements out the door, save your reviewing all the accounts for your account review, right? If the patient has a question about a statement, I think it's great that they call. So the other is run the aged receivables a minimum of every 30 days. And then I would also track those numbers, because unless there's some unicorn software that I'm not aware of, it's really difficult to go back. You can see what it is now. It's difficult to see what it was a year ago. And then start with your insurance accounts, being sure that those claims have been paid, or that they may need to be followed up on, because your patients will have questions about the insurance. Dr. Shelburne, is there anything that you'd like to add to this?
No, I think you covered it very well. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So again, want you guys to be sure and inquire about patient billing if you have any questions. Then the other is schedule time to work your accounts receivable. Stephen Covey talks about, the 4 quadrants. You've got your things that are important but not urgent, right? You have your things that are important and urgent. You have things that are urgent but not important. And then you have things that are neither urgent nor important. Accounts receivable is not it's not like the patient that presents themselves in your reception area with their hand on their side of their face saying, "Can you see me?" It's one of the easiest things to push to the back burner. And depending on the size of your practice, you may not have a dedicated person, right? That's how I found eAssist. Was a lot of my clients had needs to help with the outstanding insurance follow-up, to help with patient billing. That's how I was introduced to it. But the purpose of this educational portion is to give you best practices on how to handle this in-house. Depending on the size of your practice, you might have a person, right? You could have a person dedicated to both outstanding insurance follow-up and patient billing follow-up. You could have 2 different people doing that. You might have one person doing both things. But when if we're using an example of, let's say, a smaller type practice that might have, 8, 10 team members, and there is a person that's wearing multiple hats. Part of the time they're at the front. Sometimes they're making financial agreements. How much time should I spend working on the accounts receivable? Well, the easy answer would be as much as it takes. but then I kind of sound sassy. So several hours a week, and I would designate what I would call power hours. If this is not your dedicated thing that you do full time. So a power hour a day, or it might even take 2 power hours a day. And you have this Elvis has left the building time where the rest of the team knows, hey, this is what Amanda's working on during these 2 hours, and we don't interrupt Amanda. So not that you don't have other things going on during the day, but if you wait until you have time to work your accounts receivable, you won't have time until it really becomes a problem. And then a lot of that money will not ever be collected. So if you do these things, look, we have confetti. That just makes me happy. Your collections are managed to 97 or 98% net production after adjustments minimally. Of course, we'd love to see you at 100% collections of net production. 97 to 98% would definitely be a healthy benchmark as well. So what's next? Here's some takeaways. Create an internal office policy and process for managing that patient portion of your collections. Create and implement a written financial agreement for your patients, and feel free to use our template. Schedule some power hour times for your financial secretary to work on those outstanding patient accounts. And then proactively schedule monthly calls or face-to-face meetings between the office manager and doctor owner to see how we're doing. Any input from you guys before I go to the next slide?
All good.
Okay. And then the monthly office manager and doctor review. And I want to go back to that last point on the other slide. When you wait until you need to have a meeting to have one, it's usually too late, right? So definitely have a scheduled time. And if it can be the same day, same time every month, that's helpful. Looking at the overall accounts receivable and other practice metrics, any denied or delayed claims, determine what's the cause of those and how they can be reduced or eliminated. And how can we work together as a team so that we don't have this back office, front office, the back office teams like, wow, the front, they just are not interested, right? They ought to be able to get this information, right? And then the front frustrated with the back saying, well, they don't understand what we go through, working together to improve that communication on behalf of the patient. And then documentation concerns, inaccuracies, inadequate information. And Dr. Shelburne, I'd love for you to chime in here at the end, just again about the importance of that documentation and just what that really means. I think you're the best person to do that.
Well, in terms of collections, in terms of compliance, in terms of protection, the clinical record begins and ends in all those areas. The billing, coding, the insurance submissions, all are based on what the doctor observed and the treatment that was provided to take care of that condition being treated. And if that's not in the clinical record, it's not going to generate clean claims, and your AR and the denied claims and requests for other information will be a plague that you'll have to deal with every day of your practice. So communicate. When the doctor is not meeting the expectation, if there are denied as a result of miscommunication, or if the financials aren't happening, whatever it is, communicate. Set the standard and make sure that that standard is maintained, and you can only do that through communication, meeting regularly, and reviewing those.
Absolutely. And so I know we're going to allow some time here for Q&A. And if you guys have not already dropped some, I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. I haven't looked to see what they were because I thought I might get distracted. So if we'll be doing that coming up here in just a moment. And while you're putting additional questions in there, Sarah, I'll have you share with the next couple of slides with everyone, if you would, as they're typing some Q&A questions in.
Sure, absolutely. Again, you can use that Q&A chat bubble at the bottom. And just as a reminder for you guys, we are going to send you the slides. Any of the documents that Penny and Dr. Shelburne mentioned today on the meeting, we'll make sure we email to you guys as well. And we'll send you the recording here from part 2. And if you need the recording for part 1, we dropped that in the chat a couple of times as well throughout the webinar. So feel free to grab that and recap what you may have missed on the first one. Again, we got a few questions that are coming in. We'll get to those in just one second. But if you guys do have any other questions for us, you can contact our team at our email addresses who are listed here. And Penny, if you don't mind going to the next slide too. All right. We also have this really exciting Confident Coding in 2021. It's a 6-part webinar series that starts on February 17th and happens each week after that. And this is also going to feature Penny and Dr. Shelburne and other experts in this area. If you are interested in registering for that course, it is dentalzing.com/coding. Penny, anything you want to add on that one?
Well, I think if you haven't already gotten your new coding manual for 2021, most of you probably have it. I can not recommend enough for you to come because Dr. Roy Shelburne will really be the star of this show. I'll be helping facilitate this along. You could be leaving money on the table. You could be causing quite a bit of unnecessary frustration if you're not aware of those new codes. And he's going to break down, not break dance, although we might be able to convince him to do that. You never know. He's going to share with us what you should start using, the code you should start using, the code you should eliminate, and then by category, some of the best practices to be sure that you guys are getting the reimbursement that you deserve. And Dr. Shelburne, did I leave anything out?
No, like I said, all about making sure they get everything they're entitled to, no more and no less, and keeping them out of harm's way. That's what we'll be focusing on, the new codes, how they affect the submissions, as well as we talked about some very confusing aspects, and we'll be delving very much deeper in those. As far as non-covered optional services, we'll go at length in those, so everybody will have the tools they need.
Right. And just a couple of other details. I highly recommend everyone on the team attend. For those that are registered for that, you will be able to get the recordings afterward. And we are offering, you'll see on the registration page, we are offering continuing education for that event as well. So if you love the codes, you'll love this. If you're frustrated because you wish more people on the team were aware of the codes, then this is definitely something that you'll want to take part in.
And if you hate the codes, our goal is to make you hate them less.
That too.
Or it could
So,
further establish that you hate them, but it'll be a really fun time while you're part of the club.
absolutely. We want to have some really good time doing that. And, I inadvertently opened one and it looked like it's answered. So that question came in first. Can I go there first?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and read it so that everybody else on the call can also know what the question was. We got a question that came in from one of the attendees that they asked, with the non-covered benefits, this is good for all insurances? I have a staff member telling me it is for only certain plans that follow state laws. This is confusing with what you just mentioned. Can you please clarify?
I can very much clarify. So although the states have adopted legislation, 40 of the states have done that, there are two different type of plans. There's one that is a conventional insurance plan where the person who buys the insurance or the employer pays an insurance company a per monthly amount to have insurance coverage. That is a standard plan. There are other plans that are considered self-funded. So large companies like Walmart, they don't pay Delta Dental of Arkansas for an insurance product for the employees. What they do, they've contracted with Delta of Arkansas to administer their plan, which means all the claims go to Delta of Arkansas. They process them and figure out how much they're going to have to disperse to pay the dentist for the work that's been done. They then send a bill to Walmart, who writes a check to Delta Dental of Arkansas to cover all those disbursements. That is a self-funded plan. And a self-funded plan is governed by federal law, and federal government has not adopted non-covered benefit legislation. So even though the patient is in your state, if it is a self-funded plan, the insurance company can then dictate to you how much you can charge for non-covered services. So it's splitting hairs. And in today's world of our patients with insurance, over 50% are insured by self-funded plans. So about 50% of your patients who have insurance, a self-funded plan, they come into your practice, and even though your state has adopted the legislation, the insurance company, Delta of Arkansas, for a Walmart employee can say, you're not going to pay for crowns, we don't cover crowns, but you can only charge the patient this much.
Is that in the contract usually?
No.
So
No,
what would be the best way other than 1-800-ROY Shelburne for them to find that
to find
out?
out, there are a couple of ways. The insurance cards will generally say administered by, if it's a self-funded plan, or controlled by. If it is a conventional insurance plan, it will say insured by. So that's kind of splitting hairs. And another way that you can do that is when you verify benefits. You can ask, is this a self-funded plan or is this a conventional insurance plan? And like I said, if it's self-funded, all the non-covered benefit legislation is off the table if and until the government actually adopt that legislation on their own. Splitting hairs, I love that.
And then we had a little bit of a follow-up question as well. On the NCB question, is there a way to include the question during our insurance verification?
Absolutely. When you're asking the type of plan, I would ask, is this a self-funded plan or is it a regular indemnity plan? And they should be able to tell you it's self-funded. And like I said, that will clue you into the fact that non-covered benefit legislation will not be benefit to you.
Awesome. All right. A couple of the questions that came in also were about the recording, the slides, and any of the documents. Just as a reminder, we are going to send you the recording, the slides, and any documents mentioned in today's call via email within 48 hours. You'll get that to the email you registered for the course with. And then you also asked about part 1 of the webinar. This is part 2. We will also have part 3. But part 1, we dropped the link into the chat here for you guys as a reminder. Please go ahead and bookmark that, save that. It was a really great webinar. Super awesome information. All right, next up, Irene wants to know if there's a paperless form for the financial agreement.
There is not. If you have paperless forms, I would get with your form vendor and show that to them and see if that's something that they could set up. That's a template. I wish there were. Maybe we can invent one, but we don't have one yet.
And I think somewhere back around in the financial agreement steps, we also got this question and asking if the agreement total would be the patient portion.
So, right. So the agreement total would be for the amount that we would expect to be reimbursed for the treatment. That's a great question. So I believe in the example, if our full fee is $2,000, but our fee schedule fee is $1,500, even though the patient may only be estimated portion, let's say $750, the agreement total is going to be the total amount that we expect to be reimbursed. And then we put the patient's estimated portion in that lower section. So that's a great question.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Next up, we got a question from Heather who wants to know if this session counts for any ADOM credit.
I don't believe, I'm not aware of it counting for ADOM credit. Have our sessions like this counted for those before?
No. We don't have the ADOM accreditation for this particular webinar. We would love to be able to offer that in the future. I think that'd be an awesome thing for us to add to
I think that's a great thing for us to find out.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
We'll figure that one out for next
I
time.
didn't know that ADOM gave credits for courses outside of their own venue, but maybe they do. We'll have to find that out. Thank you for asking that question.
Awesome. All right. Next up, we got a question from Jessica regarding the financial agreements again. And she wanted to know, Washington state law is vague, but our understanding is that we are not supposed to collect in advance for private pay patients. Without asking for legal advice, have you run into this agreement issue agreement options to pre-collect even just a deposit?
If it's private pay, and first, so I'm going to go back to our slide that we cannot give legal advice. My short answer is I have not heard of that. If it is a private pay patient, Dr. Shelburne, unless you're familiar with something that I'm not, I don't know how there could be a legislation saying that you can't collect in advance. Now, if it is a PPO contracted plan, you might have difficulty getting a reservation fee for an appointment. I want your opinion on this, please, Roy.
In terms of the PPOs, they can have language in the PPO contract that can prohibit the doctor from collecting prior to delivery. That's unusual, but it can exist. And it's one of those instances where even though those contracts that you sign are long and boring, it behooves you to read them. And those letters you get from the insurance companies, interim, that you open, look at and go, this is just not, I'm not going to read this. You throw it in the trash. Be aware that the insurance companies can unilaterally change that policy and disclose it in that letter that they send to you, and you don't read that letter, and the next thing you know, not only are you in network with that insurance plan, but 15 other discount plans as well. They probably sold you to those discount plans and disclose that in that letter they sent to you. So can there be language in the contracts that can actually stipulate this? Yes. Private pay or out of network, they can't stipulate that you can't collect upfront for your patients. So there again, that there are certain restrictions that you have obligated yourself to by signing that contract, even though it doesn't make sense. Can they mandate that you can't? Yes.
If it's fee for service, I would check your state practice act. And if that does not give you any clarification, I would reach out to the dental board.
Great advice. Like that one a lot. All right. Thanks so much, Penny and Dr. Shelburne. Next up, how do you handle a situation where the doctor refuses to handle a front staff member's incompetency?
Let me count the times. Yes. Sometimes, here's the great thing. I'm not even looking at the Q&A, so I don't know the name. Don't tell me the name of the person that asked. Yes. And sometimes it's been a relative, like a sister-in-law or their mom, or just someone new, or they're overwhelmed and they don't want to have to face replacing them. So if you are the office manager, I would do what I can to train that person and work on some specific levels of competency that you want to help them achieve. And if you are asking my opinion as a coach of how to get the doctor to see that, I would loop the doctor into some of those meetings when we're setting the expectation of, this is what we need you to be able to do. This is something that we're going to work on for the next couple of weeks. And I would I have this belief, right? Most people, if they have a big enough want to, can be coached up to rise to the occasion. That doesn't always, number one, they have to have the big enough want to. But often they're not competent. It's one of two reasons, because there are very few training programs out there to teach people to be competent if they've never been in dentistry before. And then you have a lot of people that say they have experience. Maybe they came to you from another office and they had the same experience over and over and over that they had after they'd only been there for about 30 days. So I'm not sure how much that helped answer that question, but have I seen it? Yes. I'm sure Dr. Shelburne has seen it too.
I have, and the only thing I would add, great answer, Penny. I appreciate that. But the conversation that the team members who have recognized the situation, I wouldn't encourage all of you going at one time to be able to do that, but I would ask for conversation, and I would open it by saying, Doctor, I care very much about your patients. I care very much about your practice. I care very much about your team, and I care very much about you. And because I do feel an obligation and an ownership in this practice, that I'd like to share something with you if you're open to hearing it. Always ask permission, open it up so they understand where you're coming from, that your heart is in the right place. And if the doctor says, yes, I'd like to hear about it, then I would convey the information as non-judgmentally as possible. You don't label this person one way or the other. Communicate behaviors. This is what I've observed. This is what I've seen the effect it's had on the patient, on our services. And in that event, if you set it up that way, if your doctor has a desire and has the best interest of the patients and practice at heart, I can't see where they wouldn't move in that direction.
And I think to add to that, Penny and Dr. Shelburne, the other thing that immediately came to my mind, one of my favorite quotes out there from Dr. W. Edwards Deming is, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." So having data and tracking to show the underperformance of the team member or that particular area, not even making it personal about the team member, but really about the performance of the practice. And of course, naturally, I would be, amiss if I didn't mention that most of the things that they may be incompetent at, guess what? eAssist has 1,200 people who are competent at it. So if they aren't able to do certain areas, or if they have certain strengths they are good at that you can play at, outsource what they don't do well to people who do it the best in the country, the cream of the crop. And so that's a very easy option that truly didn't exist in the dental field even 10 years ago. Now you have the opportunity to do that. And we have a knowledge base of 1,200 people at eAssist who can support that when you guys want to outsource and find a remote team who has the expertise. So that's obviously another solution to a problem there of how to handle a lack of training and a lack of competency. Use the people who are the experts, and that would be eAssist.
Yeah, I love that question. It indicates that they do have the practice success and well-being at heart by asking that question. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And then our final question here, I think, is a perfect segue also to flip back maybe one slide, Penny, and talk about our Dental Zing course. Jamie's wondering if some of the information and content we've covered here will be covered in the Dental Zing course, possibly even in more depth or with more information. What can we expect from this course? Again, guys, this is dentalzing.com/coding, and you can go register for this 6-part series there. And you can have up to 10 CE credits for your team if you guys want to register as a team. So really excited about that 6-part series. But Penny, what can people expect as a next step based off of what they've learned today?
Awesome. So what we talked about today, some of what Dr. Shelburne talked about in as far as the demystifying regarding the codes, everything about that upcoming series has to do with the updated CDT codes, the new ones, the ones that really should be put to sleep in your system, the things that by code type, right? So preventive, restorative, your basic, major, your prosthesis, ortho, implants, all of those types of things. Not only the coding changes, but also the most common misunderstandings and misuses of codes, what documentation that you'll need to have to get that paid. So we scratched the surface, Dr. Shelburne did, for maybe like 3 minutes of today's content would be anything similar to this coding series. So just think about 6 different sessions, not only with the content, but also with the ability to be able to ask and clarify questions of Dr. Shelburne. And Roy, if there's anything that you want to add as far as what will be different or what will be included, please chime in.
Just to quote my good friend Lois Banta, I'm going to be going into obnoxious detail.
I love it.
This will not be a 101. This will be a 701 course where going to get behind the curtain, not only on some of the coding, but the tricks and maybe a little bit of the psyche behind what the insurance companies are looking at. Sequencing is always important, what you do in what order to maximize the reimbursement. So we're going to pull down those walls, and it's no holds barred. We're going to go as deep as we possibly can, and making sure before we're done, all your questions are answered. You're able to understand the non-covered benefit, the optional services. We're going to go very deep in all the magic words to give you insights into how to deal with every component of the billing cycle of your business.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So please go check that out. dentalzing.com/coding, 6-part series talking about all the different kinds of procedures, really in depth, like Dr. Shelburne said. Really excited to see you guys on that. And again, if there's anything else that we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, whether it's patient billing or additional follow-up questions. You can always contact our team. You can contact our panelist here by emailing webinar@eassist.me. And guys, again, just as a reminder, thank you so much for joining us. We will be sending you the recording, the slides, and any of the documents that we mentioned here today on the call. And in part 1, we'll drop that into the chat one more time for you guys so you can see it there. But we would love to see you guys again on part 3. We'll be emailing you guys information on that as well, so you can join our next part 3, the final of the Becoming the Ultimate Office Manager series. Penny, Dr. Shelburne, anything you want to say to wrap up and say goodbye to our awesome attendees who are still here with us?
I'd just like to say that with my experience in incarceration, I understand the importance of time. You just spent an hour and 25 minutes with us, and I value the investment you've made in yourself and your team and in your future. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'll echo that for sure. You know what, there are plenty of other things that you could be doing. And while we know we don't know everything, we hope that we shared some information to make your life easier and make your reimbursement better.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
All right, thank
Bye.
you.